You walk into a pharmacy, you head down the health aisle, and immediately you're enveloped in this aura of absolute calculated precision.
Oh, yeah, it really is. It feels like stepping into a high-tech laboratory or something.
Exactly. You've got these pristine, geometrically aligned rows of bottles, and they're categorized, from vitamin A all the way down to zinc.
Right.
And the labeling system is just deeply comforting for a consumer because it operates on this very binary problem and solution logic.
Yeah, it's very much insert coin, get result.
Right. You feel fatigued, you just grab the bottle labeled energy support, or, I don't know, you want to avoid osteoporosis, you grab the calcium. It plays perfectly into our desire for biology to be visible and neatly categorized.
And above all, approved by some infallible scientific authority.
Yes, exactly.
But that aesthetic of clinical precision is, honestly, it's arguably the most successful illusion in modern retail.
Wait, an illusion?
Oh, completely. Because beneath that veneer of the perfectly organized supplement aisle, the actual reality of how these compounds interact with human biology and the regulatory framework that actually governs them is just staggering.
It's a lot messier than the bottles make it look.
Much messier. We're looking at a nutritional landscape that operates with, frankly, very few proactive safety nets.
Which is exactly why we are diving headfirst into our source material today, the essential guide to vitamins, minerals, and supplementation.
It's such a crucial topic.
It really is. And our mission for you listening is to completely demystify this massive, often totally contradictory world. We want to take you from standing in that aisle, staring paralyzed at an alphabet soup of acronyms and marketing claims, and transform you into a highly informed critical thinker.
Because you really have to be one these days.
You do. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand the underlying mechanisms of these microscopic compounds, the reality of where they actually come from, and the genuinely surprising legal loopholes that allow them onto those pristine shelves in the first place.
Yeah, and just to give you a sense of the stakes here, we're going to unpack how certain seemingly benign everyday vitamins can actually trigger catastrophic physiological cascades if you pair them with very common prescription medications.
Which is terrifying.
It is. We're also going to look at the historical data, which reveals that the very concept of a vitamin wasn't discovered in some sterile lab. It was actually the result of a massive, fatal public health crisis.
Triggered by human technological advancement, right?
Yes, specifically in food processing. It's a wild story.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we really can't grasp how a supplement works or, why the FDA regulates them the way they do without first mapping out the biological blueprint.
Right, the fundamentals.
Yeah. We need to define what vitamins and minerals fundamentally are at a molecular level and why the human machine absolutely requires them to function, even when the required doses are microscopic.
Well, it starts with a core biological deficit.
A deficit.
Yeah. Vitamins and minerals are substances required for cellular growth, development, and just the maintenance of countless metabolic pathways. But the crucial defining characteristic for humans is that our bodies generally lack the endogenous pathways to synthesize them.
Meaning we can't make them ourselves.
Exactly. We cannot manufacture them from scratch.
So we are entirely reliant on external inputs. Like if it doesn't cross the barrier of our mouth, our cells simply don't get it.
Precisely. We are obligate consumers of these specific compounds. And if we are deprived of them, the biological tasks they facilitate, which is everything from synthesizing DNA to contracting a muscle, they begin to stall and eventually fail.
Wow.
But within that broad category of, essential nutrients, vitamins and minerals operate on completely different chemical paradigms. And the source text makes a really sharp distinction between organic and inorganic compounds.
Right. And we should definitely clarify for you listening, in this context, organic has absolutely nothing to do with the premium pesticide-free produce section at the grocery store.
Oh, no, not at all. We are talking about organic chemistry.
Yes, organic in the structural sense.
Right. Vitamins are carbon-based molecules. They are synthesized by living organisms, plants, fungi, animals. And because they are complex organic molecules, their chemical bonds are inherently fragile.
They break down easily.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the sheer instability of these compounds when exposed to standard environmental stressors. Vitamins can be denatured or entirely oxidized by heat, by ultraviolet light, or just by shifts in pH levels.
So the moment you harvest a crop, a biological countdown clock starts.
That's a great way to put it. And our standard methods of food preparation actively accelerate that clock.
Like cooking.
Yeah, exactly. The Maillard reaction when you sear a piece of meat, or the boiling water you use to blanch vegetables,
Mm.
even just the ambient oxygen and UV light hitting a sliced apple on your kitchen counter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, these environmental factors are actively breaking the carbon bonds of the vitamins, rendering them metabolically useless before you even consume them.
So you could structurally be eating a highly nutritious food, but the thermal and oxidative stress of just preparing it has decimated the actual bioavailability of the vitamin.
Exactly. You are consuming the roughage, the fiber, the macronutrients, but the micronutrient profile has been significantly degraded.
That is wild.
Now, flip the script to minerals. Minerals are inorganic.
Right.
They are elemental. They originate in the Earth's crust, in the soil, and the water, and they're drawn up into the food chain by plant roots.
Like rocks and metals, basically.
Essentially, yes.
Mm.
And because they are elemental, they are virtually indestructible in a culinary context. You can boil calcium, you can expose iron to UV light, you can subject zinc to acidic marinades, and they remain chemically intact.
They don't break down into secondary, useless compounds.
Right. They are the elemental bedrock.
Okay, so now, within that very fragile category of organic vitamins, the text divides them strictly by how our bodies absorb and transport them.
Yes, this is crucial.
We have water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins, and this isn't just a trivial categorization, right? It entirely dictates how dangerous these compounds can be.
It dictates their entire pharmacokinetic journey through your body. So, water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C and the entire B-complex family are found in the aqueous portions of foods.
The watery parts.
Right. When you digest them, they are absorbed directly into the portal vein and enter your bloodstream. And because human blood is primarily water, they transport very easily.
That makes sense.
But the brilliance of human physiology is how it handles the excess. The kidneys act as a continuous, highly sensitive filtration system.
Okay.
As blood passes through the renal system, the kidneys detect the circulating levels of water-soluble vitamins. If the concentration exceeds your body's immediate metabolic needs, the kidneys simply excrete the excess into your urine.
So there's an active built-in pressure release valve. Like if I take a massive megadose of a water-soluble vitamin, my body just says, we don't need this, and flushes it out.
Right. You are essentially just generating highly expensive vitamin-rich urine.
That's a funny way to think about it.
It's true. The risk of acute toxicity is incredibly low because the body actively refuses to stockpile it.
Okay, but fat-soluble vitamins are a different story.
Completely different. Fat-soluble vitamins bypass that renal safety valve entirely.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about vitamins A, D, E, and K.
ADE key.
Right. Because they are lipophilic, meaning they dissolve in fats, not water. They require specialized dietary lipids and bile acids just to be absorbed through the intestinal wall.
They need fat to travel.
Yeah. Once inside, they can't just float freely in the watery blood. They have to hitch a ride on protein carriers called chylomicrons.
Okay, and here is the critical danger, right? Your body does not excrete the excess.
No, it doesn't.
It shuttles those fat-soluble vitamins into your liver and into your adipose tissue, your body fat, and it stockpiles them for long-term storage.
Which creates a compounding mechanism.
And I think this is a perfect moment to challenge a deeply ingrained modern bias. We live in a culture that relentlessly preaches more is better.
Oh, absolutely. The optimization mindset.
Right. If an optimization protocol calls for X amount, we naturally assume 10X will turn us into superhumans. But the source text is aggressively explicit about this. With fat-soluble vitamins, more is a chemical threat.
It is a profound threat.
Because they are sequestered in the liver, chronic megadosing of fat-soluble vitamins doesn't optimize you. It triggers hypervitaminosis.
Yes.
You can literally induce liver toxicity, bone pain, and neurological issues by poisoning yourself with a highly concentrated health product.
It's a vital warning. The physiological storage mechanism that evolved to save us during winter famines becomes a massive liability when you hand a modern consumer a bottle containing, say, 5,000% of their daily requirement of vitamin A.
You're short-circuiting the system.
You are actively bypassing the body's natural rate-limiting steps.
Okay, so that covers the organic, fragile vitamins and their absorption pathways. Let's look at the stable, inorganic minerals. The text splits them not by solubility, but by the sheer volume the body demands.
Right, macrominerals versus trace minerals.
Let's break that down.
Macrominerals are the bulk infrastructural materials. The body requires them in significant quantities, usually measured in hundreds of milligrams or even grams per day.
Like calcium.
Exactly. Calcium and phosphorus are the classic examples. They actually form the hard crystallized matrix of your skeleton called hydroxyapatite.
The physical building blocks.
Yes. Trace minerals, conversely, are required in microscopic quantities, often just a few micrograms. Iron, zinc, selenium, copper.
But their low volume requirement does not diminish their critical importance, right?
Not at all. While macrominerals provide structural rigidity, trace minerals often act as catalysts and regulators.
To visualize this, I like to imagine the body as a massive state-of-the-art server farm.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. So the macrominerals, your calcium and phosphorus, are the physical infrastructure. They are the heavy steel racks bolted to the concrete floor, providing the physical architecture so the whole system doesn't just collapse. You need tons of it.
Yeah, the bulk mass.
But the trace minerals are the highly specialized components. Iron is the microscopic copper wiring carrying the data. Chromium is the thermal paste preventing the processors from overheating.
I love that.
You only need a fraction of an ounce of thermal paste compared to tons of steel, but if you forget to apply that tiny dab of chromium, the server rack overheats, the processors melt, and the entire multi-million-dollar infrastructure fails completely.
That perfectly illustrates the systemic dependency. Take chromium, as you just mentioned. The text highlights its role in normalizing blood glucose. It actually enhances the action of insulin.
So it's the thermal paste.
Exactly. Without that microscopic thermal paste, the cell receptors can't bind insulin effectively, glucose backs up in the bloodstream, and you develop severe metabolic dysfunction regardless of how strong your steel racks are.
That makes total sense. So we have this intricate biological requirement. We need the fragile vitamins for metabolic reactions, the stable macrominerals for structure, and the trace minerals for regulation.
Right.
But the realization that we required these specific molecular inputs didn't come from a sudden flash of insight in a 20th century laboratory.
Oh, not even close.
It was paid for in blood. It came from centuries of brutal trial and error, usually driven by catastrophic environmental or technological shifts.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture of human history, the narrative is largely one of blind suffering.
It's pretty grim.
Very. Long before biochemistry existed, humans understood the visceral, immediate consequences of severe dietary restriction, even if they couldn't identify the invisible molecules they were actually missing.
Which brings us to the Scurvy and Beriberi Chronicles. This is where the sheer mechanical failure of the human body becomes terrifyingly clear.
Let's start with scurvy. It's perhaps the most famous historical example, heavily associated with the Age of Discovery.
Right, ships crossing the ocean.
Exactly. You have thousands of sailors undertaking these transoceanic voyages, completely isolated from fresh produce for months on end. Their diet devolves into salted meats and dried hardtack.
Just zero fresh food.
Zero. And without fresh food, the crew begins to physically disintegrate. The clinical symptoms of scurvy described in the text are grim. Their gums swell and bleed, their teeth literally fall out, old scars physically tear open again.
Wait, old scars open up?
Yes, their joints ache with severe inflammation, and eventually it leads to fatal hemorrhaging.
It literally sounds like the collagen holding their cells together is just unzipping.
That is exactly what is happening biochemically.
Yeah.
Vitamin C, or ascorbic acid, acts as an essential cofactor for the enzymes that synthesize and stabilize collagen.
Okay.
Without it, the body produces defective, weak collagen. Since collagen is the primary structural protein in blood vessels, skin, and connective tissue, the absence of vitamin C means the structural integrity of the human body literally dissolves from the inside out.
That is horrifying.
It is. Now, the sailors didn't know about ascorbic acid or collagen synthesis. But by the 1700s, figures like James Lind observed that citrus fruits, lemons, and limes could miraculously halt and reverse the physical disintegration.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They discovered that lemon juice prevented the horrific death, but the source material points out that it wasn't until the early 1930s that scientists finally isolated ascorbic acid and proved it was a specific molecular cure.
It's a profound historical lag.
It really is.
For roughly 2 centuries, naval fleets successfully deployed a prophylactic cure without having the slightest understanding of the underlying mechanism. They knew it worked, but they had absolutely no idea why.
But scurvy was a disease born of geographical isolation. You were stuck on a boat. The source details another disease, beriberi, which was actually born out of human progress.
Yes.
And this goes back to the hook we mentioned earlier. Can you break down the tragic irony of the 1880s rice processing crisis? Because the text indicates that a massive spike in beriberi, which caused heart failure and nerve damage, was directly caused by manufacturers trying to, quote, improve food.
It is one of the darkest unintended consequences in the history of food science. So, in the mid-1880s, the invention of steam-powered rice mills allowed manufacturers to heavily process and polish rice.
On an industrial scale.
Right. They systematically stripped away the fibrous outer layers, the bran and the germ, leaving behind the pristine white endosperm.
Which is the white rice we know today.
Exactly. This polished white rice was aesthetically pleasing, it cooked faster, and most importantly for the manufacturers, it had a drastically longer shelf life because pests weren't attracted to it.
Because the pests intuitively knew the nutrients were gone.
Exactly. The manufacturers believed they were creating a superior, refined, modern product. What they didn't realize was that the discarded outer husk contained an incredibly high concentration of a specific compound that the human nervous and cardiovascular systems require for fundamental cellular energy production.
They literally threw away the most important part.
They did. By pushing this new, technologically advanced white rice out to populations that relied on rice as their primary caloric staple, they inadvertently engineered a catastrophic public health crisis. Rates of beriberi just skyrocketed.
And the symptoms of beriberi are horrifying. The text describes severe mental confusion, muscle wasting, massive fluid retention, skyrocketing blood pressure, and catastrophic heart disturbances.
Yes, because without that compound from the rice husk, the body cannot metabolize carbohydrates into ATP cellular energy.
The battery goes dead.
Exactly. The nervous system and the heart muscle, which are highly energy demanding, simply run out of fuel and begin to fail. And for decades, the global medical community was completely baffled. Because they were entrenched in the newly discovered germ theory of disease, they assumed beriberi must be an infectious bacteria or a toxin.
They were looking for an invader, not a deficit.
Right. It took a massive paradigm shift to understand that a disease could be caused by the absence of something. And that breakthrough finally happened in 1912.
Okay, 1912.
A biochemist named Casimir Funk was studying the discarded rice polishings. He successfully isolated the life-saving compound. Because he identified its chemical structure as containing an avamine group, and because it was clearly vital to biological survival, he fused the concepts and coined the term vital amine.
Vital amine, vitamin.
And that single linguistic and scientific breakthrough cracked the code. The term was shortened to vitamin, and it unleashed a tidal wave of biochemical research.
A gold rush, basically.
Completely. Over the next 2 decades, scientists raced to identify the rest of these elusive compounds. By the 1930s, we didn't just know what they were. We had figured out how to synthesize them and compress them into isolated pill forms.
If you zoom out, that timeline is genuinely staggering. Think about it. For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens evolved relying entirely on the complex matrix of whole foods to survive. We suffered scurvy, beriberi, rickets, and pellagra because we were at the mercy of our diets.
Yes, our environment dictated our health.
But the ability to chemically isolate a nutrient and deliver it in a concentrated capsule, that technology is less than a century old. In evolutionary terms, the dietary supplement is an absolute novelty.
It is a radical departure from how humans have historically interacted with nutrition. We moved from systemic deficiency to the ability to hyperdose isolated compounds in a matter of a few decades.
Which leads us directly into the modern reality of supplementation. We established the industry in the 1930s, and it has just exploded.
It's massive today.
The source text explicitly states that today, a majority of adults in the United States take some form of dietary supplement, usually a daily multivitamin. But if this isolation technology is so new, we have to ask the fundamental question, who is this actually for? Who biologically requires these isolated pills?
To answer that, we have to define the baseline of nutritional sufficiency. According to the source, the ideal state for human health relies on a widely varied diet.
Like real food.
Yes, we're talking about consistent daily intake of whole grains, a spectrum of fresh fruits and vegetables, dairy, lean meats, eggs, nuts, and seeds. When you consume nutrients bound within a whole food matrix, they come packaged with thousands of cofactors, fibers, and phytochemicals that naturally optimize absorption.
So for a healthy person eating this way, the food alone is entirely sufficient to meet their biological requirements.
Absolutely. The food matrix acts as the delivery system.
Right.
And it's a highly evolved symbiotic system. But when we deviate from that ideal state, we start leaning on the supplement facts panel on the back of a bottle. And the text notes that when you look at that panel, you aren't just getting isolated vitamins.
Oh, no, it's a whole chemistry set.
Exactly. You are getting active ingredients mixed with binders to hold the pill together, excipients like magnesium stearate to keep the machines from jamming during manufacturing, and various flavorings and fillers.
Right, there is an entire industrial chemistry involved just in making the pill physically viable.
Yes, but beyond the manufacturing, the text outlines highly specific, vulnerable populations who genuinely cannot rely on the whole food matrix,
Yeah.
who actually needs the pharmaceutical intervention of a supplement.
So let's talk about them. Who are they?
The source identifies distinct categories of physiological and behavioral risk. First, there are volume and restriction issues. People who chronically consume fewer than 2 meals a day or those on extreme calorie-restricted diets simply aren't processing enough physical mass of food to extract the required micronutrients.
Makes sense. If the volume isn't there, the nutrients aren't there.
Exactly. This also includes strict vegans and vegetarians who systematically eliminate animal products, which are the primary bioavailable sources of certain compounds like vitamin B12 and heme iron.
Okay, so that's a behavioral lack of intake, but what about physiological barriers?
That brings us to chemical and mechanical interferences. The text specifically calls out polypharmacy.
Taking multiple prescriptions.
Right, people taking 3 or more prescription medications daily. Many common drugs actively alter stomach pH, block absorption pathways in the gut, or accelerate the excretion of vitamins.
They interfere with the body's natural processes.
Heavily. Similarly, chronic heavy alcohol consumption is devastating to nutrient absorption. Alcohol physically damages the lining of the gastrointestinal tract and aggressively blocks the active transport mechanisms required to absorb B vitamins, particularly folate and thiamine.
Wow.
And finally, you have mechanical gastrointestinal disorders like Crohn's disease or celiac disease.
Because the actual architecture of the gut is compromised.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, your small intestine is lined with microscopic projections called villi that absorb nutrients.
Right. They grab the good stuff.
Yeah. Diseases like Crohn's cause severe inflammation that blunts or completely destroys those villi. You could be eating a perfectly optimized, organic, varied diet. But if the physical absorption surface is destroyed, the nutrients just pass straight through you.
That's incredibly frustrating for a patient, I'm sure.
It is. In all these cases, the vegan, the heavy drinker, the patient on multiple prescriptions, a Crohn's sufferer, the whole food matrix fails. They absolutely require the targeted, concentrated intervention of a supplement to survive.
Okay, but I have to push back here on behalf of the listener.
Okay, go ahead.
You just listed very distinct severe conditions: Crohn's disease, chronic alcoholism, intense polypharmacy. But the text noted earlier that most U.S. adults take a daily supplement.
True.
Most adults do not have Crohn's.
No, they don't.
If I'm a listener who eats a relatively okay diet, maybe not perfect, but I eat my vegetables most days, isn't a daily multivitamin just a harmless, slightly expensive insurance policy? Why do so many healthy people pop these pills sporadically or chase some random vague symptom with a handful of vitamins?
It's an incredibly common mindset, and it exposes a massive psychological trap.
To trap.
Yes. The danger isn't necessarily immediate chemical toxicity from a standard multivitamin. The danger is behavioral compensation.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
The supplement industry has brilliantly marketed these pills as a neutralizing agent for bad habits. People develop a subconscious rationale. I worked late, I skipped lunch, and I ate highly processed fast food for dinner. But I took my multivitamin this morning, so my nutritional ledger is balanced.
They think it cancels out the bad choices.
Exactly. Our source material vehemently rejects this logic. It explicitly states that dietary supplements are intended strictly to add nutritional value to an already solid baseline. They are emphatically not a substitute for a healthful diet.
You can't outpill a bad diet.
You really can't. You cannot extract the isolated ascorbic acid out of a red bell pepper, put it in a pill, and expect it to replicate the complex biochemical symphony of the fiber, the water, and the thousands of unidentified phytonutrients you get from eating the actual pepper.
It's reductionist thinking. You're trying to cheat the biological system by extracting one variable and ignoring the whole equation.
Precisely.
And treating complex fatigue or mood issues by arbitrarily taking a zinc pill on a Tuesday is fundamentally misunderstanding how systemic human health works.
You cannot outsupplement a terrible diet. And when healthy people treat these concentrated compounds as casual commodities, it opens the door to severe unintended consequences.
So what does this all mean? It means we have hundreds of millions of people casually consuming concentrated, isolated biological compounds every single day, often to compensate for poor diets, operating under the assumption that these little pills are perfectly safe.
Yes.
If they are in the grocery store, the government must have rigorously tested them to ensure they are safe and effective.
Right. That is the most dangerous assumption a consumer can make.
Welcome to the Wild West of the American regulatory system, because the source text shatters that illusion of safety completely.
We have to dismantle the idea that over-the-counter equals benign.
Right.
The text stresses that consumers intrinsically believe that if an ingredient is in a commercial supplement, it is safe. This is false. Supplements contain pharmacologically active ingredients that induce profound systemic effects on the human body.
And the text doesn't just make broad warnings, it provides terrifying, specific examples of how these benign vitamins can catastrophically interact with serious medical protocols. Let's talk about the oncology interactions.
This is a prime example. The text highlights a deeply concerning interaction involving antioxidant supplements, specifically massive doses of vitamin C and E.
Okay.
When a patient is undergoing certain types of chemotherapy for cancer, the chemotherapy drugs often work by generating massive amounts of oxidative stress-free radicals designed to intentionally damage and kill the rapidly dividing cancer cells.
So the chemo is basically a targeted chemical weapon designed to oxidize the tumor.
Exactly. But if a patient decides, I have cancer, I need to boost my immune system, and they start self-administering high-dose antioxidants like vitamin C, what happens?
Oh, no.
Antioxidants neutralize oxidative stress. The supplement aggressively hunts down and neutralizes the exact free radicals the chemotherapy is relying on to kill the cancer.
Wow.
The patient's attempt to be healthy may actively protect the tumor and reduce the efficacy of the life-saving chemotherapy.
That is harrowing. You are inadvertently giving the cancer cells a shield against the chemo.
Yes.
And the text provides another highly specific, incredibly common example involving cardiovascular patients. Millions of older adults are on prescription blood thinners like warfarin or Coumadin to prevent lethal blood clots. But what happens if they mix that with the standard vitamin E supplement?
Vitamin E possesses inherent natural anticoagulant property.
It thins the blood.
It mildly thins the blood by interfering with platelet aggregation and vitamin K-dependent clotting factors. On its own, in a healthy person, this isn't an issue.
Right.
But if a patient is taking their prescribed Coumadin, which is tightly dosed to keep their blood viscosity at a specific level, and they unknowingly add high-dose vitamin E on top of it, they are stacking the pharmacological effects. They compound the thinning action.
They're essentially double dosing themselves without their cardiologist having any idea.
Precisely. And this stacking effect drastically increases the risk of severe, spontaneous internal bleeding or a hemorrhagic stroke.
That's terrifying.
It is. This unpredictable pharmacological stacking is exactly why the text points out that anesthesiologists will universally demand that patients cease all dietary supplementation weeks prior to an elective surgery.
Because they have no idea how that random herbal blend or high-dose mineral is going to interact with the anesthesia they are pumping into your spine.
Exactly. Certain supplements can induce enzymes in the liver that cause the anesthesia to metabolize far too quickly, meaning the patient could wake up on the table.
Nightmare fuel.
Literally. Others might fatally alter cardiac rhythms, induce massive spikes or plummets in blood pressure, or cause the patient to bleed uncontrollably during the incision. It is a highly volatile, unpredictable variable in an environment that requires absolute precision.
So if these compounds are powerful enough to neutralize chemotherapy and cause surgical hemorrhaging, we have to ask, how on earth are they allowed to be sold next to the chewing gum and shampoo without a prescription?
It's a great question.
What is the specific legal loophole that created this reality?
It all comes down to a foundational, somewhat astonishing legal classification by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA.
Okay, let's hear it.
When a pharmaceutical company develops a new prescription medication, say a new blood pressure pill, the FDA classifies it as a drug, and the regulatory burden for a drug is monumental.
It takes years.
Years, sometimes decades, of double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials. The manufacturer must explicitly prove to the FDA that the chemical is safe, and they must prove that it is unequivocally effective at treating the specific disease it targets before it ever sees a pharmacy counter.
Which is what we all expect.
Right. But Through a combination of historical precedent and intense legislative lobbying in the 1990s, the FDA was mandated to classify dietary supplements under an entirely different umbrella. Legally, the FDA regulates supplements as food.
Wait, I need to make sure I'm grasping this. They look at a highly concentrated, pharmacologically active, isolated chemical compound, compress into a gelatin capsule, and legally define it as food, just like a carrot or a loaf of bread.
Legally, yes.
That's insane.
Because of this classification, the supplement industry operates under a completely inverted regulatory paradigm. The most critical distinction is this: no pre-market approval is required.
None at all.
None. Manufacturers do not have to conduct clinical trials. They do not have to prove to the FDA that their product is safe for human consumption before putting it on the shelf. And they absolutely do not have to prove that it is actually effective at delivering the health benefits they imply.
It's essentially a nightclub where the bouncer, the FDA, sits in the back office playing solitaire.
Exactly.
They aren't standing at the front door checking IDs, patting down the products, or verifying that only safe, effective compounds get inside the club. They only step out of the back room to kick a guy out after he's already inside, started a massive bar fight, and hospitalized someone.
That is an incredibly apt analogy for the FDA's reactive posture. The text confirms this. The FDA does have the legal authority to take action if a supplement is proven to be adulterated or fundamentally unsafe.
So they can act.
They can mandate market removals or issue sweeping recalls. But crucially, the burden of proof is on the FDA to prove the product is dangerous after it has already been mass marketed and consumed by the public. The damage has often already been done.
So if the FDA isn't checking safety or efficacy beforehand, what rules do the manufacturers actually have to follow?
Their primary strictures are regarding labeling and claims. A supplement manufacturer is legally allowed to state that their product addresses a specific nutrient deficiency, or they can use vague structure-function claims.
Like what?
Like saying a product supports joint health or promotes a healthy immune system.
Ah, vague buzzwords.
Right. But if they make those claims, they are legally bound to include a very specific mandatory disclaimer on the packaging.
It's the microscopic text at the bottom of the bottle we've all squinted at.
Yes. It must explicitly state, this statement has not been evaluated by the FDA, and the product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Covers their bases.
The FDA monitors the physical packaging to ensure manufacturers don't cross the line into making illegal disease-curing claims, and the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, polices the television and internet advertising for blatantly deceptive marketing.
But because that barrier to entry is virtually non-existent compared to pharmaceuticals, the market is completely flooded. It's a gold rush. And the source text outlines the grim, real-world consequences of this lack of oversight.
It creates a deeply compromised supply chain. Because anyone can manufacture and sell a supplement quickly, the market is saturated with bad actors.
People just trying to make a quick buck.
Exactly. The text points out that quite often, independent laboratory testing reveals that the physical pills do not even contain the specific vitamins or minerals listed on the label.
Which is blatant fraud.
It is. Manufacturers will pack the capsules with cheap, inert botanical fillers, or worse, untested synthetic analogs. Or, equally dangerously, the pills might contain massive, wildly inaccurate concentrations of the active ingredient, far exceeding what is printed on the label.
And that circles right back to the biochemical danger we discussed earlier regarding fat-soluble vitamins. If the bottle claims it has 100% of your daily vitamin A, but due to terrible manufacturing quality control, it actually contains 10,000%, and you take it every single day, you are slowly inducing liver failure, and you have no idea because you trusted the label.
Exactly. The text explicitly notes that consumers, particularly those buying highly marketed products from unknown or unverified brands, are at a severe risk for negative outcomes.
It's a gamble.
There are thoroughly documented medical cases of consumers requiring emergency room interventions simply after consuming an over-the-counter dietary supplement that was tainted or wildly overdosed.
Wow.
This raises an important question for you, the listener. How do you navigate this landscape? When the governmental guardrails are removed, the burden of safety falls entirely on your ability to apply critical thinking.
You have to be your own bouncer.
Exactly. The source text explicitly begs consumers to be deeply skeptical. You have to actively ignore the barrage of social media videos, the influencers and the testimonials, claiming that a specific proprietary supplement offered an astonishing cure or resulted in a miraculous physiological transformation.
Because if a compound actually possessed the pharmacological power to cure a disease miraculously, it would be classified, studied, and regulated as a prescription drug.
Exactly. You must continually contrast the two realities. A prescription medication undergoes years of grueling clinical scrutiny to verify its claims. A new supplement can be conceived, manufactured in an unregulated facility, and launched via an aggressive internet ad campaign in a matter of weeks.
So the actionable advice here, pulled straight from the source material, is non-negotiable. Consult your primary care provider or a registered dietitian before adding a concentrated supplement to your daily routine.
Always.
Have them review it against your existing prescriptions to avoid those catastrophic interactions we talked about. And if you do need a supplement, do the research to find established, highly reputable companies that subject themselves to voluntary third-party testing.
Look for independent verification.
Do not just buy the cheapest, flashiest bottle that algorithmically pops up on your social media feed.
Your baseline metabolic health is far too valuable to gamble on cheap, unregulated excipients and wildly inaccurate dosages.
Okay, so let's walk through the final scenario. You've listened to the warnings, you've consulted your doctor, you've identified a physiological need. Maybe you are iron deficient or you live in a northern climate and need vitamin D.
Common scenarios.
You are standing in the aisle holding a bottle from a highly reputable third-party tested brand, but the moment you turn that bottle around to check the dosage, you hit another wall.
The labels.
The label is covered in a dense, almost impenetrable alphabet soup of nutritional acronyms. You're looking at RDAs, DRIs, EARs, AIs, ULs, and DVs. It looks like a high-level statistics textbook. Let's translate this so the listener knows precisely how to read the vital data on that label.
To understand the modern ladle, we actually have to look at the historical evolution of nutritional science. The acronyms have fundamentally changed because our understanding of human health has changed.
So it wasn't always this complicated.
No, it wasn't. For decades, the absolute gold standard metric was the RDA, the Recommended Dietary Allowance. This system was originally developed around the time of World War II by the Food and Nutrition Board of the National Academy of Sciences.
And the driving philosophy behind that original WWII-era RDA was incredibly basic.
It was essentially wartime triage. The historical RDA was designed primarily to calculate the exact amount of vitamins and minerals required to keep the population and the troops from developing severe deficiency diseases.
It was the minimum baseline to not get scurvy or rickets metric.
Precisely. It was focused entirely on preventing acute, visible illness based on your age and biological sex.
Okay.
But as nutritional science matured into the late 20th century, epidemiologists and biochemists realized that simply not having scurvy is a spectacularly low bar for human health.
Yeah, we want to thrive, not just survive.
Exactly. The scientific paradigm shifted. The goal was no longer just staving off acute deficiency. The goal was optimizing long-term health and preventing chronic, systemic diseases like osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, and macular degeneration.
A much more holistic approach.
Because of this massive philosophical shift, the old singular RDA system was retired and replaced by a highly complex, comprehensive framework known as the Dietary Reference Index, or the DRI.
Okay, we are.
Yes, the DRI is the modern overarching standard currently utilized by health professionals in the United States and Canada. It represents the complete spectrum of nutrient values required by healthy populations.
Sounds comprehensive.
It is. But here is where it gets confusing for the consumer. The DRI isn't a single number. It is an umbrella term that encompasses 4 entirely different statistical reference points. Each one serves a highly specific purpose for scientists, policymakers, and consumers.
All right, I'm going to step in here and advocate for the listener. If I am in the grocery store trying to figure out how much magnesium to take, I do not want to run a statistical regression analysis on public health data.
Fair enough.
I just want to know what the baseline is, what the goal is, and at what point I am going to poison myself. So let's break these 4 distinct DRI metrics down into highly practical terms.
Let's do it. We start with the bedrock data point used by scientists.
Yeah.
The ER, or estimated average requirement. Yes.
Yeah.
The ER is a statistical median. After reviewing thousands of clinical trials and metabolic studies, scientists determine the exact amount of a specific nutrient that will meet the biological requirements of exactly 50% of the healthy individuals in a specific demographic, say, non-pregnant adult women ages 31 to 50.
So the ear is the dead center of the bell curve. If everyone in that demographic consumes the ER, half of them will be perfectly nourished, and the other half will still be biologically deficient.
Exactly. Which means the ER is fantastic for scientists evaluating the diet of a broad population, but it is a terrible target goal for an individual because you have a 50-50 chance of falling short.
Okay, flip a coin. That's not great.
And that brings us to the second most recognizable metric. Using the ER as a mathematical foundation, scientists calculate the modern version of the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance.
They kept the old acronym.
They did, but they updated the math. Statistically, they take the ER and add two standard deviations. The resulting number, the RDA, is the daily dietary intake level that is mathematically sufficient to meet the nutrient requirements of 97 to 98% of all healthy individuals in that demographic group.
Ah, okay. So while the ER is the 50% coin toss, the RDA is the actual gold standard goal for the individual. If I hit the modern RDA for my demographic, there is a 98% statistical certainty that my body has all the raw materials it needs to thrive.
Yes, the RDA is the target you want to hit.
Okay, good. Target acquired.
However, nutritional science is constantly evolving, and sometimes the clinical data for a specific nutrient is too thin or too contradictory to confidently establish an exact ER. And if you don't have the ER, you cannot mathematically calculate the RDA.
So what do they do?
When this happens, the scientific committee relies on the third metric, the AI, or adequate intake.
So the AI is used when the hard math fails.
Right, and AI is essentially a highly educated, scientifically rigorous estimate. Researchers will observe the dietary patterns of a group of healthy people who aren't showing any signs of deficiency, and they will estimate their intake.
It's a placeholder.
Exactly. The AI serves as a temporary placeholder goal for the public until more robust clinical data can be generated to establish a true RDA.
Okay, so to recap, EAR is the 50% baseline, RDA is the 98% optimized goal, AI is the educated guess when the data is fuzzy.
You got it.
But what is the fourth metric under the DRI umbrella? Because earlier we talked extensively about the severe dangers of hypervitaminosis and toxic stacking. Where is the metric that protects us from that?
That is the fourth and arguably the most critical metric for modern consumers who heavily supplement, the UL, or tolerable upper intake level.
The absolute ceiling.
The hard ceiling. The UL represents the absolute highest average daily intake level of a nutrient that is likely to pose no risk of adverse health effects to almost all individuals in the general population.
The danger zone marker.
Precisely. If your combined intake from food, fortified products, and supplements begins to routinely exceed the UL, your statistical risk of experiencing a toxic adverse pharmacological event increases exponentially.
They're telling you to back off.
The UL is the scientific community's way of explicitly stating, stop here. More is not better. More is chemically dangerous.
That is phenomenal context. The UL is the guardrail on the edge of the cliff. Now, the source text also briefly references the AMDR. It sounds similar, but it applies to something entirely different, right?
Yes, the AMDR stands for Acceptable Macronutrient Distribution Range. While everything we just discussed, EAR, RDA, UL, applies to microscopic micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, the AMDR applies to the massive, calorie-providing macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and dietary fats.
The big stuff.
Right. The AMDR provides broad percentage ranges for your total daily caloric intake. For example, it might suggest that 20 to 35% of your daily calories should come from fats.
And what's the point of that?
The dual purpose of the AMVR is to ensure you are consuming enough physical fuel to sustain your metabolism while simultaneously minimizing the risk of chronic metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis.
Right, so we've mapped out the entire scientific architecture, but let's be realistic. When a consumer picks up a bottle of vitamin C or a box of cereal, they don't see EARs or AIs printed on the back. The FDA requires a much simpler, universal shorthand for the consumer, and that is the final acronym, the DV, or daily value.
Yes. The daily value is the ultimate distillation for the consumer market. Found on virtually all food and supplement labels, the DV collapses all of that complex demographic data into a single standardized percentage.
It just makes it readable.
To create a universal baseline, the FDA standardizes the DV based on a hypothetical diet of 2,000 calories per day. This allows a consumer to look at a label and instantly perform the mental math.
Give me an example.
You look at a serving of fortified cereal, and it says calcium, 20% DV. You instantly know that one serving provides roughly 1/5 of the calcium a standard adult needs for the entire day.
It strips away the complex math and just gives you the practical utility.
Yes. And if we step back and analyze this entire evolution of nutritional metrics, from the primitive wartime RDA designed just to keep soldiers from dying of scurvy, to the highly nuanced, statistically rigorous DRIs and the establishment of firm toxicity ceilings with the UL, it reflects a massive maturation in our relationship with biology.
We've come a long way.
We have. We've transitioned from an era of systemic, inescapable nutrient starvation to an era where modern consumers have unregulated 247 access to massively concentrated doses of isolated chemicals.
Yeah, that's a huge shift.
The science had to rapidly evolve to protect us from our own technological abundance.
We conquered the famine, but now we have to survive the feast. And that requires a completely different type of vigilance.
It absolutely does.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. Let's quickly retrace our steps to solidify the massive amount of ground we've covered.
You covered a lot.
We really did. We began by mapping the fundamental biological blueprint of the human machine. We contrasted the incredibly fragile, carbon-based organic vitamins compounds, so delicate they can be destroyed simply by boiling water or exposure to oxygen, against the rugged, indestructible, inorganic macrominerals and trace minerals pulled straight from the Earth's crust.
Right. We explored the brilliant renal filtration system that allows our bodies to easily flush out excess water-soluble vitamins while highlighting the severe toxic dangers of chronic megadosing with fat-soluble vitamins which stockpile in the liver and adipose tissue, waiting to trigger hypervitaminosis.
We then explored the dark historical timeline that forced us to discover these molecules in the first place. We traced the visceral horrors of scurvy on the high seas, where collagen literally unraveled without vitamin C.
And we unpacked the tragic irony of the 1880s beriberi crisis, where the technological advancement of steam milling rice systematically stripped away the vital B1 needed for neurological survival.
And we marveled at the incredibly compressed timeline, from Casimir Funk coining the term vital amine in 1912 to the mass-manufactured isolated supplement pills of the 1930s.
Then we shattered the clinical illusion of the pharmacy aisle, confronting the dangerous realities of the modern supplement boom. We learned why whole food matrices are vastly superior, but why vulnerable populations, like those with Crohn's disease, chronic alcoholism, or heavy polypharmacy, genuinely require targeted supplementation.
Most importantly, we exposed the massive regulatory loophole born in the 1990s that legally classifies highly concentrated, pharmacologically active pills as mere food.
Yes. We discussed how this FDA classification removes the requirement for pre-market safety testing, turning the agency into a reactive bouncer.
And we detailed the terrifying life-or-death pharmacological interactions that can occur when unregulated supplements neutralize chemotherapy treatments or massively compound the bleeding risks of prescription blood thinners.
And finally, we translated the complex alphabet soup of modern nutritional science. We moved past the outdated scurvy-preventing RDA and explored the modern DRI framework.
We defined the statistical median of the EOR, the 98% optimized goal of the modern RDA, and crucially the vital importance of the UL, the absolute toxicity ceiling, so that consumers have the tools to navigate the labels safely.
It is a phenomenal amount of complex, overlapping science, biochemistry, and law.
Right.
But absorbing this fundamentally alters the lens through which you view your own health and every single product on that shelf.
I couldn't agree more.
Yes, and that also means we have a responsibility to remain deeply analytical about the future of our food supply. I want to leave you with a lingering, provocative thought that builds directly on the historical tragedies we analyze today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think back to the beriberi epidemic of the 1880s. The smartest food engineers in the world invented the steam-powered rice mill. They polished the rice, made it shelf-stable, and thought they were improving human nutrition.
Right.
Instead, they caused widespread neurological devastation and heart failure, simply because human science at that exact moment in history had not yet discovered that vitamin B1 existed in the discarded husk. They had no idea what they were throwing away.
The technology outpaced their biological understanding.
Exactly. Now, project that exact same dynamic forward to the present day. Look at the staggering complexity of our highly industrialized, ultra-processed, modern food supply. We are employing extrusion, chemical bleaching, high-temperature rendering, and synthetic preservation on a global scale.
It's massive.
It forces a chilling question. What incredibly common, universally accepted food processing techniques are we deploying right now, every single day, that might be quietly, systematically destroying or stripping away vital, complex micronutritional compounds that human science simply hasn't even discovered yet?
That is a profoundly unsettling thought. We could very well be engineering the insidious, low-grade metabolic deficits of tomorrow inside the state-of-the-art factories of today, completely blind to the vital molecules we are erasing from our diet.
It's very possible.
I want to challenge you, the listener, to take this knowledge straight into your own home. Go open your pantry. Open your medicine cabinet, pull out the bottles, and actually read the labels. Look for the fillers and binders. Look for the DVs. Ask yourself honestly if you are using that pill as a targeted, medically necessary addition to your life, or if you are using it as a psychological crutch to excuse a highly processed diet.
It's an important question to ask.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration.
It has been a deeply rewarding conversation.
Because the next time you walk into that pharmacy and the fluorescent lights hit those perfectly aligned, highly marketed rows of bottles, you won't be fooled by the illusion of clinical precision. You will know exactly what mechanisms are at play, what risks are hiding in the fine print, and you will navigate those complex waters with absolute clarity. Stay relentlessly curious, think critically about what fuels your machine, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.